because then I started wondering, is all sexuality, has it always been defined by power?
Hello and welcome to Distraction. I'm Dr. Ned Hallowell, your host of the show that explores our super busy, also super distracted modern world. On today's show, I'm going to take you to one of my favorite little places, the East Rock Coffee Shop in New Haven, Connecticut, where I went to drink up not only the coffee, but the power of the human connection. And that's the voice you heard at the top of the show, David Reed. He sat down and we jumped right into a fascinating conversation about his field of study, the roots of sexual mores dating back to before Christ. He's a fascinating man. Join me as we meet Dave. So, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Like what specifically did?
What comes to mind? Who are you?
I'm a postdoc at Yale in religious studies. I also teach over at, I'm an instructor over at Albertus Magnus in philosophy and religion.
Now, is that a religious institution, Albertus Magnus?
Yeah, it's a Catholic institution. It's in the Order of Preachers, the Dominican order. And I finished, recently finished my first book.
Oh, really?
So I'm doing a lot of editing now.
What did you write it about?
I wrote it about sex. It's early Christianity. So when anybody asks me that, now I'm afraid because you're a psychiatrist. So you're going to want.
Oh, believe me, no. So I'm not going to read anything into it.
Okay.
Sex in early Christianity?
In early Rome, in early Christianity, I went from the Augustan period on through the early monastic period.
Tell me about it. What was the sex like in early?
Messed up. It's something I became intrigued in when I was doing doctoral work. I started reading Michel Foucault.
For those of you like me who've forgotten who Foucault was, I looked it up a little bit, and it turns out he's a French philosopher. His theories address the relationship between power and knowledge. Among other things, he wrote The History of Sexuality, a 3-volume study of sexuality in the Western world.
And started kind of wondering where our sexual ethics came from in the modern world. And I was confused by all these things we hear in modern society about the Judeo-Christian sexual ethic is this, or that. And so I started researching it and started discovering that I'm not really sure where we got our sexual ethics from and why we keep saying they go back to this particular point in Christianity. So my entire book concludes by saying, actually, we didn't get any of our sexual ethics from early Christianity. We might have got them from Greco-Roman philosophy or from the Augustan moral programs and Roman religious laws.
So it wasn't because St. Paul was effed up about sex that we...
He was effed up about sex. He was very effed up about sex, but not in the way that we think he was effed up about sex. So this whole idea that you're supposed to just get married and have 2.5 kids is not coming out of early Christianity. The early Christians, including Paul, were actually saying, don't procreate at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Don't have a family.
Why? Because that's too much flesh?
Too much flesh, too much the world was supposed to end. There was also this idea that the way you stop original sin is stop procreating. And so I was curious, why do we never talk about this anymore in the modern world? Because you would think that the idea is two people get married, they have kids, etc. And it's very hard to find that in early Christianity. But you can find it in Roman marriage laws, you can find it in Greek and Roman philosophy.
So before Christ.
Right.
And so what were their laws about? What
their laws were get married, procreate, have a bunch of kids. But the reason they wanted that, for instance, with the marriage laws in Rome, was they wanted, the Emperor Augustus wanted people to fight his wars.
Did they put a premium on fidelity?
Yeah, but it's propaganda, like anything, you know. So even Augustus would sit around and say, look at my wife and my children, and everybody in the Senate knew he was running around and committing adultery and all sorts of things. They knew it was a joke, which told me that politics hasn't changed.
And how about gay? How did that fit in?
He just kept quiet about it.
So that was it?
Well, nobody would have thought about it. I mean, the problem is that it was very normal for certain Roman boys that were going to go through the upper echelons of Roman society and rise up the ranks. A rite of passage was what we would consider gay sex.
With each other? Or
with each other, yeah. So you would have a higher-ranking Roman official who would have a young boy who was his protege or whatever, and they would have sex. But it was not thought of that was homosexual. It was just simply that's what you do. It's a rite of passage. This whole idea that we talk about today of is it biological, is it are you gay, are you straight? Nobody's thinking in those categories, and the early Christians aren't thinking in those categories either.
It was just normal? It was
just normal.
Yeah.
And what they were more concerned about was the active-passive partner. If you were the passive partner, like the young boy, you weren't in a position of power. The key was to always be in the position of power when you were involved in sexual activity. So even if you're straight and you're sleeping with your wife, you don't want her on top because she's in a position of power. That's a bigger quote-unquote sin.
So dominance was a key part of
sex.
Really?
Yeah, it's like you're always told. It's always about power.
And those roots do go back to Greco-Roman.
Right, it goes back to Greece, it goes back to Rome. You even see it in early Christianity. It's all about power.
It's all about power.
And that's what I got interested in, because then I started wondering, is all sexuality, has it always been defined by power?
And what do you think?
I think it is.
So being attracted to someone, how does eros mix with power? I mean,
I think that we would like to think it doesn't. But I think if we were honest with ourselves, and then maybe this sounds too Freudian, but I think if we were honest with ourselves, that we would realize that a lot of what we do isn't eros, it isn't for love, it isn't for, a lot of it is really motivated by other deeper concerns that are really about power.
To dominate.
To dominate, yeah.
So what's in it for, let's say the man is dominating the woman. What's in it for the woman?
Good question.
Well, why does she participate?
Because it's part of society, because you've been socialized into a structure that tells you this is what you do. And I think sometimes we don't realize that most of what we think and believe about anything, particularly sexuality, comes out of the socialization process of a culture. And that's also power. It tells you how to be, it tells you how to act. And I think oftentimes we don't realize we're playing a part in that script.
Well, what about pleasure? What about libido? You know, why would a woman masturbate?
Well,
that's not about power.
No, that's not about power. Right. So that could be a way of actually subverting the power structure. Because you could create pleasure for yourself, and then you bring in Paul into that, who just says, no, that pleasure, that's a problem.
That's bad, right.
And some of the philosophers said that too.
So pleasure itself becomes...
Pleasure could become a problem, especially excessive pleasure.
What's excessive? Any?
Well, whatever's not moderation. I don't know. They never define that. I wish they did. It's kind of that all things in moderation, idea.
Right. And the Puritans, do they come from that?
I think most of our sexual hang-ups and things come out of the Puritans, but I'm not sure if they're getting it from the Bible as much as they think they are. They would want you to believe that, but the reality is something keeps happening to sexuality in every single culture. It gets redefined. It gets defined by politics. It gets defined by philosophy. It gets defined by whatever, by society.
Right.
And, they had their own society defining sexuality, and then we became inheritors of that.
What is your sexuality?
As in...
Are you active? Are you heterosexual?
I'm heterosexual, married. I've been married for, going on 13 years.
Do you have children?
No, we're trying. Right now we held that off.
What does your wife say when you say it's all about power? She
would. Anybody that knows us knows I don't wear the pants in the family, which is why everybody thinks it's weird that I study those.
So she would laugh.
She would laugh, yeah. I think we have a very balanced, sort of equal relationship. We have I think we have a relationship that a lot of people are envious of. But
by your model, your interest in her is simply to dominate her. Then you say you don't.
No, I try not to. So
But you think her interest in you is to dominate you?
I hope not.
The rubber meets the road.
No, and then my excuse is I say, no, I'm just here to raise questions. I'm not here to answer those questions. And then you'd have to talk to her too, and then see what she would say.
Yeah.
Because it's only going to be my perspective on things. And then sometimes I think the awareness of what is actually going on in different societies and throughout history hopefully the awareness of it makes you start rethinking it and not doing those things.
Well, couldn't it be that the power dynamic becomes isometric? In other words, you're both. What's sexually exciting is an embrace is kind of a power.
Sure.
Thing,
yeah. And maybe you can share power. At some point.
Yeah. Or the struggle neither wins, but it's exciting to contest.
Right. Maybe.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it that way. I think I'm going to start. I'll try that and see if she.
Let's contest tonight, sweetheart.
Right.
Now, are you studying to be a teacher or?
Yeah, I finished my PhD 2 years ago at the University of Toronto, and so
are you
then
Canadian?
No. Thank you, though. No, I'm not. And then I went and came here to do a postdoc to work with a specific individual here, because I didn't like the dissertation I wrote. I wanted to rewrite it. And so I came here and then started working here, and I'm back out on the job market as of this fall.
With a PhD in religious studies?
Yeah.
So you don't want to be a preacher?
Oh, God, no. I would be very bad at that.
So you would teach religion at a college?
Yeah, you teach it as like a theory of religion, using Freudian theories, or you teach it as history, or even teaching like in a divinity school or a seminary like Yale Divinity School or something like that.
Are you religious yourself?
Yeah. I don't know if everybody would say I am, but given some of the things I write on, but no, I'm a practicing Catholic, and now you want to go down that road, don't you?
But I'm a practicing Episcopalian.
Oh, okay. So it's like kissing. You have less guilt though than we do.
Yeah, we don't have a pope.
Yeah,
and we have gay priests, and we have female priests. You
have all the good stuff. Yeah, but
you know where celibacy came from? As a student of religion, you probably do.
It depends on
what I've heard.
Okay, you tell me.
It's real estate. The popes didn't.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It had nothing to do with theology.
Right, it's people. They needed to keep the property in the right. Yeah, you don't want that passing on to. See, it's all about power.
Power, exactly. In that one, in that case, yeah. So the Pope said, "Well, God just told me last night priests should not have sex anymore." So and then, bingo.
Right, exactly.
Now, how do you maintain being a practicing Catholic in the face of all the obvious reasons not to be?
It's hard. It's a struggle. It's something my wife and I talk about a lot.
If you have kids, will you raise them Catholic?
Yeah, because I think there's something important. I think you'd understand as an Episcopalian. I think there's something important to ritual. I think there's something important to a tradition.
Well, this gets back to my thing about connection. I think it's a rich source of connection that a lot of intelligent people have sort of excluded because we live in such a scientific age.
Exactly.
They scoff at it.
Yeah.
And what they're passing up is the connection. I call it the connection to what is beyond knowledge.
Okay.
So it's by definition you can't prove it. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't think about it. Or,
right.
Celebrate love and forgiveness and goodness and come together on Sunday morning or Saturday evening or whenever you want to and feel a part of a community that values those things.
And I guess that's part of why when you ask how do you hold this all together with Catholicism, that I find something important in that community that is actually kind of anti-American society in a way, because when I go there, it reminds me I'm not an individual, that I'm connected to something larger.
Right.
And that's very hard because most of my life, and your life, and everyone's life in this country is spent in a very individualistic manner. And I like realizing that there is something larger out there than me.
And literally, thank God.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't do it alone.
No. And I think too many of us think we can. And that has been the most important thing to me, is learning community.
Yes.
In those types of situations. And my big fear about American Catholicism is it's becoming very, very American.
Yes.
And becoming very individualistic.
Yes, yes.
It's not what I've read about.
Right.
It's not about the community coming together.
Yeah. I love going to church, not so much to stoke my belief in God, but to get the vitamin C, I call it, vitamin connect.
Yeah, sure.
The sense of I'm a part of something larger than myself.
Right, because it's kind of the antidote to everything else, yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that's where I realize that for all the junk that's there in any religion, that's the good part of it, when it actually works and those connections are made. Because
Absolutely.
I think half the time the experience of God is found in a community anyway.
Absolutely. Don't you think? I mean, it's where two or three are gathered together.
Right.
Where there is connection, there is God.
Right, exactly. It's not me walking around having my own little...
Exactly. Are you going to write about that?
I don't know. I do know what I'm going to do the next book on, and it's I'm looking at this term that comes out of one of Paul's letters, porneia.
Yes.
Because everybody's confused on how to define the term.
Yes.
So there's an article I'm co-authoring with Del Martin and Jenny Knost. One's at Yale, one's at Boston University. And I asked them, since they're more famous and more important than I am, since I did all the research on this, can I steal this as the template for my second book? And they said, yeah, you can do that. But I've given up trying to project down the road of what I'm going to write on or do. People ask that all the time.
So what does porneia mean?
I think it means anything from lust to masturbation to adultery to
pornography comes from it.
Pornography, comes from it. And one of the things that we were very curious in working on was, can a heterosexual married couple in the ancient world commit porneia? Because most people want to say it's only adultery, prostitution, and same-sex relations, and we've discovered a bunch of texts where, a normal married heterosexual couple can commit it too. I mean, porneia can come out of a married couple in the ancient world wanting to have sex just for pleasure. That can become porneia.
So a man saying to his wife, man, you look really hot, I want to jump your bones. That's porneia?
Yeah, you're going down the porneia path at that point. It could lead to all kinds of...
And why is that bad?
Because there was this idea in the ancient world that pleasure isn't why you have sex. You have sex to procreate. I mean, it's a very practical thing. If people die, people don't live that long, we need to repopulate.
But why was pleasure deemed bad?
Because people can't deal with pleasure in moderation. The fear was, if you get a taste of it, you'll want more.
But every time you
more.
have sex, you do get a taste of it.
You do.
So
I don't get how it worked. I think it's totally impossible myself. Yeah. But there were, not just early Christian writers, but Roman philosophers like Musonius Rufus thought you should be able to totally do this act, but not for pleasure.
And not feel any pleasure.
Right, which I'm confused on that.
If you're wondering who Musonius Rufus was, he was a Roman Stoic philosopher. Stoics were people who basically said by using reason, you can control your passions.
I hope this is okay to say. It reminds me of, when I was growing up in the church and youth group, of some stupid youth minister saying, it's okay if you masturbate, just think about your math work while you're doing it. So then it's not lust or something like, and then, you start critically thinking and going, that's not possible.
And that's how these minds get twisted.
That's how they get very twisted.
Yeah, they feel tremendous guilt.
Right.
Yeah. So it goes right back to porneia and Paul and...
Yeah, I mean, and if you read Paul closely, like in his first epistle to the Corinthians, he tells you, and so you never hear Christians talk about this today, he tells you what he thinks the purpose of marriage is. It's just to prevent porneia.
To prevent porneia.
Yeah, and as a friend of mine says, Paul thinks marriage is a prophylactic against porneia. And
Did Paul have sex? Did Paul?
I have no idea. I mean, there's a theory that he was a widower.
Before he got converted?
Before he got converted, and maybe that caused all of his weird psychological whatever.
Because he, much more than Christ, is responsible for the messed up feelings we have about sex, isn't he? I mean,
well, yeah, I don't know.
Christ never said don't enjoy sex.
He didn't say much about it one way or the other, but I think the problem is it's not just what Paul said, it's interpretations of what he said. And half the time when you deal with religious subjects, you're not dealing with what they actually said. You're dealing with hundreds and thousands of years of somebody interpreting something that, I mean, if we're going to blame Paul, we should move on to Augustine and all these other individuals. I mean, you must encounter this in psychiatry, right? Of people that have messed up
all the time.
Yeah.
And it all seems to stem from these people being told that their natural feelings are unacceptable.
Yeah.
Or sinful.
Or
disgusting.
Yeah, which is right.
Twisted.
Yeah. And it takes a long time getting over that, I think, for people.
And it's my thing about connection, it poisons connections.
Yeah.
If people feel an attraction, then they say, oh, that's a sin.
Yeah. And that's not a good thing.
It's a really bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a really bad thing.
Right, because it alienates us from one another.
Yeah, and from ourselves.
Yeah. Which I think what's going on is that there's a whole conversation, the church, and I'm not saying the Catholic Church, but there's a whole conversation that we haven't had on sexuality that needs to happen.
And what would that be?
I don't entirely know, but I just think that when you look at society's changed, people are living longer, people are, people that go to grad school put off marriage, all this sort of there's just things we haven't talked about, and I think most of it is that people are afraid to talk about it because they don't want to see change. They want to go back to some myth that doesn't exist anymore, or if it ever existed.
And medically speaking, sex is good for you.
Yeah.
Which
is hilarious. I was just reading this today, and Galen, one of the Roman medical doctors, he talks about that. If you kind of at some point have to do this because it's therapeutic, so, and it's good for you.
Yes.
Medically, so.
Yes. Well, you are wonderful. I mean, it's such an original thinker. And,
thanks.
Well, thank you for talking to me. Good luck with what you're doing.
Thanks.
Can we stay in touch? Can we get your... My thanks to East Rock Coffee and to David Reed for sharing his story with us. David's book about sex in early Christianity is called Sex in the Empire, Strategies of Power from Augustus to the Early Monastics. We'll put a link on our site. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. This won't be our only foray into the subject of sexuality, so check back for more shows on sex. In fact, tell us your ideas for these shows at distractionpodcast.com. Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people.